The hotel lobby smelled like expensive candles and fresh flowers. Rachel stood at the check-in counter, her wheeled suitcase beside her, trying to shake off the exhaustion from the week. It had been brutal at work. Rumors were flying around the office about layoffs, about the company being sold, about everything changing. She just wanted to get to her room, take a hot shower, and maybe order room service. "You're all set, Miss Carter. Room 412. The elevators are just past the lounge area," the receptionist said with a practiced smile. Rachel thanked her and grabbed her key card, but instead of heading straight to the elevators, she found herself walking toward the hotel bar. She wasn't usually the type to drink alone at a hotel bar on a Friday night, but something about the warm lighting and the soft jazz music pulled her in. Plus, she deserved it after the week she'd had. The bar was half empty. A few business travelers sat scattered around, their faces glowing in the light of their laptops. Rachel slid onto a bar stool near the end and ordered a glass of wine. When it arrived, she took a long sip and let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Rough week? Rachel turned to find a man sitting 2 seats down from her. He had kind eyes and an easy smile, the kind that made you feel like you'd known him longer than 5 seconds. He was dressed casually in jeans and a button-down shirt, his sleeves rolled up to his elbows. "Is it that obvious?" Rachel asked, managing a small laugh. "Only because I'm having the same kind of week," he said. "Well, month, really. Actually, maybe the whole year." There was something genuine in his voice that made Rachel smile for real this time. "Want to compare notes? See who's had it worse?" He laughed and moved over to the seat next to her. "I'm Daniel, by the way. Rachel." They shook hands, and Rachel noticed his grip was warm and confident. Not too firm, not too weak. Just right. She mentally kicked herself for even noticing such a small detail. Daniel ordered a whiskey and they started talking. It began with small talk about Chicago, about the hotel, about how overpriced everything in the minibar was, but somehow the conversation deepened. Daniel mentioned he was apartment hunting in the city because he was starting a new job. A big opportunity, he called it, but also terrifying because it meant uprooting his whole life. "I have a daughter," he said, pulling out his phone to show Rachel a photo. "Her name's Sophie. She's 7. She's the reason I do everything, honestly." Rachel looked at the photo of a little girl with missing front teeth and bright eyes, holding up what looked like a homemade volcano for a science project. "She's adorable, and clearly takes after her dad with the confidence." Daniel grinned. "She's way braver than me. She's the one who convinced me to take this job. She said, 'Dad, you're always telling me to try new things, so you should too.'" He shook his head, his expression soft. "Can't argue with that logic." "Smart kid," Rachel said. "Where's she now?" "With her grandmother for the weekend. My ex-wife and I split 3 years ago. It's been just me and Sophie since then, figuring things out as we go." Rachel appreciated his honesty. So many guys she'd met would have hidden the fact they had a kid, or made some excuse about their ex. Daniel was just upfront about his life, no pretense. "What about you?" Daniel asked. "What brings you to this overpriced hotel on a Friday night?" "Corporate retreat," Rachel said, making a face. "Team-building exercises all weekend. Trust falls in sharing our feelings. The whole 9 yards," Daniel winced sympathetically. "Ouch. Yeah. And the worst part is, I don't even know if my job will exist in a month. The company's going through some major changes. New ownership, new management. Everyone's on edge, and that's rough." "What do you do?" "I'm in marketing. I actually love my job, or at least I did before all this uncertainty started. Now I just spend half my time updating my resume and the other half pretending everything's fine." They talked for another hour, then another. The bartender came by less frequently as the night wore on. Rachel found herself laughing more than she had in months. Daniel had this way of telling stories that made even ordinary things sound interesting. He told her about Sophie's obsession with mixing random ingredients together to make potions, which usually resulted in stains that wouldn't come out of the carpet. He talked about the challenges of being a single dad, of missing his daughter's school play because of work and feeling like the worst parent in the world. "But she forgave you, right?" Rachel asked. "She did. She always does. She's got a bigger heart than I deserve." Daniel looked down at his drink. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm doing enough, you know? Like, am I being a good enough dad? Am I making the right choices for her?" Rachel touched his arm without thinking. "The fact that you're even asking those questions means you're a good dad. Trust me." Their eyes met, and something shifted in the air between them. The conversation turned quieter, more personal. Rachel talked about her own life, about the pressure she felt at work, about how she was almost 30 and still felt like she was figuring everything out. Daniel listened in a way that most people didn't. Really listened, asking questions that showed he was paying attention. "Can I be honest about something?" Daniel said eventually. "Please. I almost didn't come down to this bar tonight. I was going to order room service and crash, but something told me to come down here. And now I'm really glad I did." Rachel felt her cheeks warm. "Me too," the bartender announced last call, and they both looked surprised at how late it had gotten. Neither of them wanted the night to end. Daniel paid for both their drinks before Rachel could protest, and they walked slowly toward the elevators. "I'm on the 4th floor," Rachel said. "5th floor," Daniel replied. They stood in front of the elevators, the moment stretching out between them. Rachel knew what she wanted, even if it was impulsive, even if it was completely unlike her usual careful, planned-out approach to life. "Do you want to come to my room?" she asked quietly. "Just to talk more. Or, not just to talk." Daniel's eyes searched hers. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure," Rachel said, and she was. For the first time in a long time, she was absolutely sure about something. They rode the elevator to the 4th floor in charged silence. Rachel's hands shook slightly as she swiped her key card. Inside the room, they didn't immediately fall into anything. They sat on the edge of the bed and talked more, but now with their knees touching, their shoulders pressed together. When Daniel finally kissed her, it felt natural, like the continuation of a conversation they'd been having all night. The night unfolded in a way that felt both exciting and comfortable, passionate, but tender. In the morning, they exchanged numbers over hotel coffee, both smiling like teenagers. Daniel had to leave early to drive back and pick up Sophie. Rachel had her corporate retreat starting in a few hours. "I'd really like to see you again," Daniel said at her door. "I'd like that too," Rachel replied. As she watched him walk down the hallway, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Maybe even happiness. She had no idea that in just 3 days everything would change in a way she never could have imagined. Monday morning arrived way too fast. Rachel hit snooze 3 times before finally dragging herself out of bed. The corporate retreat had been exactly as painful as she'd expected, full of awkward icebreaker games and trust exercises that made everyone uncomfortable. But she'd gotten through it with a smile on her face, mostly because she kept sneaking glances at her phone to read Daniel's texts. They'd been messaging back and forth all weekend. Nothing too serious, just little updates about their days. He sent her a photo of Sophie covered in flour after they tried to make pancakes together. Rachel sent him a picture of her name tag from the retreat with a sad face drawn on it. It felt easy, natural, like they'd known each other much longer than one night. As Rachel got dressed for work, she picked out her favorite blazer, the navy blue one that made her feel confident. She needed all the confidence she could get today. The entire office had been buzzing for weeks about the big announcement that was supposed to happen. New CEO, new direction, new everything. Nobody knew what to expect, and the uncertainty was killing everyone's morale. Rachel grabbed her coffee from the kitchen counter and headed out the door. On the drive to work, Daniel sent her a good morning text with a coffee cup emoji. She smiled and typed back a quick response before pulling into the parking garage. The office was chaos when she arrived. People were clustered in small groups, whispering nervously. Her coworker Kevin practically ran up to her desk the moment she sat down. "Did you hear? The announcement is happening in like 20 minutes. Everyone has to go to the main conference room." "I know," Rachel said, logging into her computer. "Try to relax, Kevin. Whatever happens, we'll deal with it." "Easy for you to say. You're actually good at your job. I'm probably first on the chopping block." Rachel wanted to reassure him, but honestly, she didn't know what to say. The truth was, nobody's job felt safe right now. The company had been bought out by some big tech corporation, and the founder who'd built the place from nothing had retired suddenly. It felt like the end of an era. At 9:30, everyone filed into the conference room. Rachel found a seat near the middle, with Kevin on one side and her friend Lily on the other. Lily worked in the design department and always knew the latest gossip before anyone else. "I heard the new CEO is super young," Lily whispered. "Like scary young to have this much power. Where'd you hear that?" Rachel asked. "Janet from accounting. Her cousin works at the parent company." Rachel rolled her eyes. Office gossip was usually about 50% accurate at best. She pulled out her phone and saw another text from Daniel. Big day at work. Wish me luck, she typed back quickly. You've got this. Good luck with whatever it is. The room quieted down as the board members walked in. There were 5 of them, all looking serious in their expensive suits. The chairwoman, Mrs. Peterson, stepped up to the microphone at the front. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for being here. As you know, we've been through a period of transition these past few months. Today marks the beginning of a new chapter for Cortex Solutions. Rachel felt her stomach twist. Here it comes, she thought. The layoffs, the restructuring, all the things everyone had been dreading. I'm pleased to introduce you to our new CEO, Mrs. Peterson continued. He comes to us with an impressive background in technology and innovation. He's going to help take this company to new heights. Please join me in welcoming Daniel Hart. The name hit Rachel like a physical blow. Daniel Hart, it couldn't be. It had to be a coincidence. There were probably thousands of Daniel Harts in the world. But then he walked through the door. The same Daniel from the hotel bar. The same Daniel who'd showed her pictures of his daughter making volcanoes. The same Daniel who'd spent the night in her hotel room 3 days ago. Their eyes met across the crowded conference room, and Rachel watched his face go pale. He stumbled slightly just for a second before catching himself. Nobody else seemed to notice, but Rachel saw it. He was just as shocked as she was. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought everyone around her could probably hear it. This couldn't be happening. This was impossible. What were the odds? Daniel cleared his throat and stepped up to the microphone. Thank you, Mrs. Peterson, and thank you all for the warm welcome. His voice was steady, professional, completely different from the relaxed, warm tone he'd used at the hotel. I know change can be difficult, and I know many of you have concerns about what the future holds. Rachel couldn't focus on his words. Her mind was spinning. Daniel was the new CEO, her boss's boss's boss. The man she'd spent the night with was now in charge of her entire company. Oh my God, he's hot, Lily whispered beside her. This is the new CEO? I might actually start showing up to meetings on time. Rachel managed a weak laugh, but inside she was panicking. What was she supposed to do? Should she say something? Should she pretend they'd never met? Her phone buzzed in her lap. She glanced down carefully. It was from Daniel. Just 2 words. We need to talk. Rachel's hands were shaking as she slipped her phone back into her pocket. She forced herself to look up at the front of the room, where Daniel was talking about his vision for the company, about innovation and growth and maintaining the culture that made Cortex special. He sounded confident, articulate, like he'd given this speech 100 times. But every few seconds his eyes would flicker toward her section of the room, and she could see the tension in his jaw. The meeting lasted 45 minutes. Daniel took questions from various department heads, talking about everything from budget allocations to diversity initiatives. He was good, Rachel had to admit. He knew his stuff, and he had a way of making people feel heard even when he was basically saying, I don't know yet, but we'll figure it out. When the meeting finally ended, people started filing out slowly, still discussing the new CEO in hushed voices. Rachel stayed in her seat, pretending to check something on her phone. Lily tugged at her arm. Come on, we need to get back. I've got a design review in 10 minutes. You go ahead, Rachel said. I need to make a quick call. Lily shrugged and left with the crowd. Soon the conference room was almost empty. Rachel finally stood up and started toward the door, her legs feeling like jelly. Miss Carter. She froze. Turned around. Daniel was standing near the front of the room with Mrs. Peterson and another board member, but he was looking directly at her. Could I have a moment of your time? I'm trying to meet with key team members today, and I understand you're heading up our new marketing campaign. His face was carefully neutral, professional, but his eyes were pleading with her to play along. Of course, Mr. Hart, Rachel said, her voice somehow steady. Excellent, Mrs. Peterson said. Daniel, I'll let you get settled. Rachel is one of our rising stars in the marketing department. You're in good hands. The board members left, and suddenly Rachel and Daniel were alone in the conference room. The silence was deafening. Rachel, Daniel started. How is this possible? Rachel interrupted, her voice barely above a whisper. You said you were starting a new job. You didn't say you were becoming CEO of my company. I didn't know, Daniel said, running his hand through his hair, a gesture she recognized from the hotel. I knew the name of the company, obviously, but I didn't know you worked here. How could I have known? This is insane, Rachel said, starting to pace. This is actually insane. I know. Trust me, I know. Daniel looked toward the glass walls of the conference room where people were walking past. Look, we can't talk here. Can you come to my office? In like an hour? I need to get through a few more introductions, but we need to figure this out. Rachel nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Her phone buzzed again. Another text from Daniel, even though he was standing right in front of her. I'm sorry. I never wanted things to be complicated. She looked up at him, and for just a second, she saw the same warm, genuine person from the hotel bar. But then someone knocked on the conference room door, and Daniel's expression shifted back to professional CEO mode. 1 hour, he said quietly. My office is on the executive floor. Rachel walked out of the conference room in a daze. Kevin caught up with her in the hallway. Hey, what did the new CEO want? You look like you've seen a ghost. Nothing, Rachel managed. Just asking about the marketing campaign. But as she walked back to her desk, she realized that nothing about her life was going to be simple anymore. The man she'd been texting all weekend, the man she'd actually started to have feelings for, was now her boss, and neither of them had any idea what to do about it. The hour felt like the longest of Rachel's life. She sat at her desk, staring at her computer screen without really seeing anything. Her mind kept replaying the moment Daniel walked through that conference room door. The shock on his face. The way his voice had stayed so professional even though they both knew the truth. Hey, you okay? Lily appeared at her cubicle with 2 cups of coffee. You've been staring at that same spreadsheet for 20 minutes. Rachel blinked and accepted the coffee. Yeah, just tired. The retreat wore me out. Tell me about it. Those team-building things are the worst. Lily perched on the edge of Rachel's desk. So what did you think of the new boss? Everyone's talking about him. Apparently he used to work for some huge company in California. Turned around their whole operation in like 2 years. He seems fine, Rachel said, taking a sip of coffee to avoid saying more. Fine? Girl, did you see him? He's like movie star attractive. And he seems actually smart. Not just executive smart where they use big words but don't really say anything. Rachel's phone buzzed. A calendar notification. Meeting with Daniel Hart, Executive Suite, 11 a.m. Her stomach dropped. It was time. I have to go, Rachel said, standing up so fast she almost knocked over her coffee. Where? We have the department sync in 15 minutes. I'll be back. The new CEO wants to talk about the campaign. Rachel grabbed her notebook. More for something to hold than because she'd actually use it. The executive floor was on the 10th level, a place Rachel had only been once or twice in her 3 years at the company. Everything up here was nicer. Bigger windows, better furniture, that new carpet smell. The assistant's desk outside Daniel's office was empty. Rachel stood there for a moment, trying to calm her racing heart. Rachel? Daniel's voice came from the open doorway. Come in, please. She walked into his office. It was huge, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. There was still unpacking to do, boxes stacked in the corner, but Daniel had already put up a photo of Sophie on his desk. That small detail made Rachel's chest ache. Daniel closed the door and immediately the professional mask dropped. He looked exhausted. I've been sick to my stomach since the meeting, he said. I keep thinking this is some kind of nightmare. You and me both, Rachel said, still standing awkwardly near the door. Please, sit. Daniel gestured to the chairs in front of his desk, but then seemed to think better of it. Actually, maybe the couch. This feels too formal otherwise. They sat on opposite ends of his office couch, the same way strangers would sit on a bus. The contrast to Friday night couldn't have been more stark. I don't even know where to start, Daniel said. I need you to know that I had no idea you worked here. When they told me the name of the company, I looked up the basics, but I didn't go through employee directories. Why would I? I never could have imagined. I know, Rachel said. I believe you. This is just some cosmic joke or something. The thing is, Daniel continued, running his hand through his hair, we need to figure out how to handle this. I'm the CEO. You report to the marketing director who reports to the CMO who reports to me. There's a clear chain of command here, and what happened between us he trailed off. Was a mistake, Rachel finished quietly. Is that what you're saying? Daniel looked at her and she saw conflict in his eyes. I'm saying it's complicated. I'm saying that if anyone found out, it could look really bad for both of us. Especially you. People might think you're getting special treatment or that there's favoritism involved. But nothing was wrong with what we did, Rachel said, feeling defensive. We were just 2 people who met at a hotel. We didn't know we'd end up working together. I know that. You know that. But do you really think everyone else would see it that way? Daniel leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. I've been in corporate leadership long enough to know how these things go. Rumors start, people make assumptions, and it's always worse for the woman in the situation. I don't want that for you. Rachel felt tears prickling at her eyes, but she blinked them back. So what are you saying? We just pretend we never met? I'm saying we need to keep things strictly professional from here on out. No more texts, no personal conversations. We treat each other like any CEO and employee would. He paused. I hate saying this, Rachel. You have no idea how much, but I have a responsibility to this company, and I have to protect you too. I can protect myself, Rachel said, but her voice lacked conviction. They sat in silence for a moment. Finally, Rachel spoke again. What if I transferred to a different department, or looked for another job? No, Daniel said firmly. Absolutely not. You're good at what you do. I've already reviewed the marketing campaign you developed, and it's excellent. You shouldn't have to leave because of this situation. Then what do? We do our jobs, Daniel said. We're both professionals. We can handle this. Rachel nodded slowly, even though everything inside her was screaming that this wasn't fair. She'd finally met someone who seemed genuine, someone she actually connected with. And now it was being taken away because of bad timing and worse luck. I should get back to work, she said, standing up. Rachel, wait. Daniel stood too. For what it's worth, Friday night was one of the best nights I've had in years. And if circumstances were different, if we'd met literally any other way. But we didn't, Rachel said. And circumstances aren't different. So we just have to deal with it. She left his office before he could say anything else. The elevator ride down felt like descending back to reality after a brief, beautiful dream. The next few days were torture. Rachel threw herself into work, trying to distract herself from constantly thinking about Daniel. But it seemed like the universe was determined to torture her. She saw him in the hallway. She passed by his office on the way to meetings. Once, they ended up in the break room at the same time, and the awkward small talk about coffee preferences was painful enough to make Rachel want to quit on the spot. Lily noticed something was off. Are you sure you're okay? You've been weird all week. I'm fine. Just stressed about the campaign launch. But then came the department presentation. Every quarter, the marketing team had to present their initiatives to the executive leadership. Rachel had known it was coming, but she'd pushed it out of her mind. Now, standing in the conference room with her PowerPoint ready, she felt sick. Daniel walked in with the other executives. He didn't look at her, just took his seat and opened his laptop. Professional, distant. Exactly what they'd agreed on. Rachel's boss, Victoria, started the presentation, talking about overall strategy and budget allocation. Then it was Rachel's turn. She stood up, clicked to her first slide, and began presenting the social media campaign she'd developed. She was proud of this work. It was creative, data-driven, and had the potential to really expand their market reach. She'd spent months on it, refining every detail. But halfway through her presentation, Victoria interrupted her. Actually, I'd like to add some context here, Victoria said, standing up. While Rachel did some of the initial research, the core strategy and creative direction came from our team's collaborative effort. I worked closely with the creative department to develop the messaging framework. Rachel's mouth fell open. That was a complete lie. Victoria had barely been involved in the project until last week, when she'd suddenly started taking credit in meetings. The data analysis Rachel is showing was actually compiled by our analytics team. Victoria continued smoothly. I want to make sure credit goes where it's due. Rachel felt her face burning. She looked at the other executives, but they were all nodding along, taking notes. She glanced at Daniel. His expression was unreadable, but she saw his jaw tighten. Ms. Chen, Daniel said, his voice cutting through the room. I've actually reviewed the project files. According to the documentation, Rachel Carter was the lead strategist on this campaign. The initial proposal, the creative brief, and the execution plan all have her name on them, along with timestamps. Victoria's confident smile faltered. Well, yes, but as her supervisor, I provided guidance and... The email chain I reviewed shows Rachel presenting the complete strategy to you 3 weeks ago, and you approved it with minor changes, Daniel continued. His tone was professional but firm. I'm not questioning your leadership, Ms. Chen, but I do think it's important that we acknowledge individual contributions accurately. Rachel's work on this campaign has been exceptional. The room was silent. Rachel didn't know where to look. Part of her was grateful that Daniel had stood up for her, but another part worried about how it looked. Victoria sat down, her face red. Of course, I didn't mean to diminish Rachel's contributions. The rest of the presentation was awkward, but when it ended, the CFO actually came up to Rachel and congratulated her on the innovative approach. Other executives followed, asking questions about the strategy and implementation timeline. As people filed out of the conference room, Rachel caught Daniel's eye for just a second. He gave her the smallest nod before leaving with the other executives. Later that afternoon, Rachel got an email from Victoria requesting a one-on-one meeting for tomorrow morning. The subject line just said, "Discussion needed." Rachel stared at the email, her stomach sinking. She'd been protected by Daniel in that meeting, but now she'd have to face the consequences with her actual boss. And worse, she knew that Victoria wasn't the type to forget being embarrassed in front of the executives. Her phone buzzed. An email from an unknown sender. When she opened it, there was just one line. "You did great in there. That campaign is brilliant. Don't let anyone take that away from you." It wasn't signed, but Rachel knew who it was from. She read it 3 times before deleting it, her heart aching. Daniel was trying to help her, trying to protect her, but in doing so, he might have just made everything more complicated, because now everyone would be watching them even more closely. The meeting with Victoria the next morning was exactly as uncomfortable as Rachel had expected. Her boss sat behind her desk with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes, fingers drumming on the armrest of her chair. "Rachel, I want to be direct with you," Victoria said. "Yesterday's presentation put me in a difficult position. When the CEO publicly corrects a director in front of the executive team, it raises questions." Rachel shifted in her seat. "I wasn't trying to make you look bad. I was just presenting the work. I'm sure you weren't, but perception matters in this company. And right now, people are talking about why our new CEO felt the need to defend you so strongly." Victoria leaned forward. "Is there something going on that I should know about?" Rachel's heart jumped into her throat. "What do you mean?" "I mean, it's unusual for a CEO to have that level of detail about a mid-level employee's work. Most executives rely on their directors to manage their teams. But Daniel Hart seems very invested in your success." "He reviewed the project files," Rachel said, keeping her voice steady. "That's all. He's new and probably wants to understand what different teams are working on." Victoria studied her for a long moment. "I hope that's all it is, because if there's any kind of inappropriate relationship happening, it won't just hurt you. It'll hurt this entire department." "There's nothing inappropriate happening," Rachel said firmly, even though the words felt like glass in her throat. "Good. Then let's keep it that way." Victoria opened a folder on her desk. "I'm assigning you to work on the quarterly reports for the next few weeks. Kevin can take over the campaign launch." Rachel felt like she'd been slapped. "Kevin? But that's my project. I've been working on it for months, and you've done excellent groundwork. Now it's time to let someone else take it across the finish line. Consider it a learning opportunity for Kevin. It was a punishment. Rachel knew it, and Victoria knew she knew it. This was payback for the presentation, for making Victoria look bad in front of the executives. "Is there anything else?" Rachel asked, barely controlling her anger. "That'll be all." Rachel walked out of Victoria's office feeling like she'd been punched in the stomach. 3 months of work, her best ideas, her strategy, and now she'd have to watch Kevin take credit for the launch. She went to the bathroom and locked herself in a stall, taking deep breaths to keep from crying. The next few weeks were miserable. Rachel buried herself in boring quarterly reports while Kevin stumbled through preparations for the campaign launch. She had to bite her tongue in meetings when he explained concepts wrong or missed important details. Lily kept asking what was wrong, but Rachel couldn't tell her. She couldn't tell anyone. The only bright spot was that she barely saw Daniel. He was busy with executive meetings and strategy sessions. Occasionally, she'd catch a glimpse of him in the hallway, always surrounded by other people, always looking professional and in control. They never spoke. They barely even made eye contact. But late one Tuesday night, when Rachel was working past 9 o'clock on the quarterly reports, her desk phone rang. It was an internal extension she didn't recognize. "Hello? Rachel, it's Daniel. Are you still in the office?" Her breath caught. "Yes, I'm finishing up some reports. Can you come up to my office?" I'm reviewing the campaign materials for next week's launch, and I have some questions. Rachel's hands were shaking as she rode the elevator to the 10th floor. It was after hours. Most people had gone home. The executive suite was quiet and dimly lit. Daniel's office door was open. He was sitting at his desk, his tie loosened, looking tired. When he saw her, something shifted in his expression. "Close the door," he said quietly. Rachel did, her heart pounding. "I asked you up here because I needed a legitimate work reason to talk to you," Daniel said. "But honestly, I just needed to see how you're doing. I heard about Victoria taking you off the campaign. How did you know about that? I'm the CEO. I know about everything that happens in this company." He stood up and walked around his desk. "It's not fair, Rachel. That campaign is yours. You should be the one launching it." "Well, life isn't fair," Rachel said, trying to keep the bitterness out of her voice. "You made that pretty clear when you said we had to pretend we don't know each other." "That's not what I said. It's what you meant." Daniel sighed. "Rachel, I'm trying to protect you. If people think there's something between us, they'll discredit everything you've achieved, everything you've worked for. And what about what I want?" Rachel said, her voice rising. "Did you ever think about asking me? Maybe I don't need you to protect me. Maybe I can make my own decisions." "You're right," Daniel said quietly. "I should have asked. So I'm asking now. What do you want?" Rachel looked at him, really looked at him. He had dark circles under his eyes. His daughter's drawing was pinned to the bulletin board behind his desk, a colorful crayon picture of their family. Just the two of them holding hands. "I want this to be different," Rachel said finally. "I want to have met you at a coffee shop or a bookstore or literally anywhere else. I want to not have to avoid looking at you in meetings. I want to text you stupid things during the day and not worry about who might see. But we don't get what we want, do we?" "Not always," Daniel said. He took a step closer. "But Sophie told me something last week. She said that her teacher always says you have to be brave even when things are scary, especially when things are scary. Your daughter sounds pretty smart." "She is. And she keeps asking about the nice lady I met at the hotel. I didn't realize I'd talked about you that much, but apparently I did." Rachel felt tears starting to form. "Daniel, don't. This is already hard enough." "I know. I'm sorry." He stepped back, creating distance again. "You're right. We should keep things professional. It's the smart thing to do." But then his phone rang. He glanced at the screen and his face went pale. "It's Sophie's grandmother. I have to take this," he answered the phone. "Hello, what's wrong?" Rachel watched as Daniel's expression shifted from concern to fear. "How high? Did you give her the medicine?" Okay, I'm leaving right now. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He hung up and grabbed his jacket. "Sophie has a fever." "It's high. Her grandmother is panicking." "I need to go." "Of course, go. Is she okay?" "I don't know. She's been complaining about her throat for a few days, but I thought it was just a cold." Daniel looked genuinely scared. "I'm a terrible father. I should have taken her to the doctor earlier." "I've been so focused on this job that I—" "Stop," Rachel said firmly. "You're not a terrible father. Kids get sick. Go take care of her." Daniel nodded and rushed toward the door, then stopped. "Rachel, the campaign materials. They're all wrong. Kevin's presentation has at least 5 major errors in the data. I was going to mention it tomorrow, but if something happens with Sophie, I might not be in." "What kind of errors?" "The target demographic numbers are off. The budget allocation doesn't match the actual spending plan. And he's got the launch timeline completely backward." Daniel pulled out his phone and forwarded something to her. "I just sent you my notes. Someone needs to fix this before the board presentation next week." Then he was gone, rushing to the elevator. Rachel stood alone in his office, looking at the email he'd sent. His notes were detailed and precise. He was right. Kevin had messed up major parts of the presentation. Rachel walked back to her desk and opened the campaign files. If she worked all night, she could fix the errors. She could make sure the launch went perfectly. But Victoria had explicitly taken her off this project. If Rachel fixed it, she'd be going against direct orders from her supervisor. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Sophie's fever is 103. Taking her to urgent care. Thank you for being there tonight. Even for 5 minutes, it helped." Rachel stared at the text. Then she looked at the campaign files on her screen. She thought about Daniel driving through the night with his sick daughter. She thought about how hard he worked to be a good dad and a good CEO. She thought about the fact that he'd noticed the errors in the campaign because he actually cared about the work, and she made a Decision. She opened her laptop and started fixing the presentation. If Victoria wanted to fire her for it, fine. But she wasn't going to let 3 months of work crash and burn because of office politics. Rachel worked until 3 in the morning, correcting every error, refining every slide, making sure the data was perfect. When she finally sent the updated files to Kevin with a note, saying she'd noticed a few small issues that needed addressing, the sun was starting to come up. She drove home, exhausted but feeling more like herself than she had in weeks. She'd done the right thing, even if it cost her. The next morning, Rachel woke up to dozens of missed calls and texts. Her heart raced as she grabbed her phone. The first message was from Lily. "OMG, did you hear? Victoria's in a meeting with HR. Something about the campaign. People are saying she tried to sabotage it." The second was from Kevin. "Rachel, thank you for catching those errors. You literally saved my life. Victoria told me that presentation was ready to go and not to change anything. I would have looked like an idiot." And the last message from that unknown number. "Sophie is okay. Strep throat, antibiotics and rest. She asked about you again. Said she hopes she can meet you someday. Me too." Rachel sat on the edge of her bed, her phone in her hands, and finally let herself cry. Not from sadness exactly, but from exhaustion and relief and the overwhelming feeling that everything was about to change one way or another. She had no idea how right she was. Rachel walked into the office on Friday morning feeling like she was heading to her own execution. The whispers started the moment she stepped off the elevator. People looked at her, then quickly looked away. Lily practically sprinted across the office to intercept her before she reached her desk. "Where have you been? I've been calling you all morning," Lily said, pulling Rachel into an empty conference room. "My phone died." "What's going on?" "Victoria's been fired." Rachel's stomach dropped. "What?" HR called her in yesterday afternoon. She was gone within an hour. Security walked her out and everything. Lily's eyes were wide. Apparently she falsified some project reports and tried to take credit for work she didn't do. Not just with you either. They found a whole pattern of it going back months. "How do you know all this?" "Janet from accounting. Her friend in HR said it was a whole investigation. Someone high up requested an audit of Victoria's projects." Lily lowered her voice. "People are saying it was the new CEO, that he specifically asked for the review after that presentation last week." Rachel felt lightheaded. She sat down heavily in one of the conference chairs. Daniel had done this. He'd protected her, but in doing so, he'd probably made everything worse. "There's more," Lily continued. "HR wants to see you at 10. They sent an email an hour ago." Rachel's hands started shaking. This was it. They were going to fire her. They'd found out about her and Daniel, and now everything was going to come crashing down. At exactly 10 o'clock, Rachel walked into the HR office on the 8th floor. The director, Patricia Kim, was waiting for her with another HR representative Rachel didn't recognize. Daniel was there too, sitting in one of the chairs, looking serious. "Please sit down, Rachel," Patricia said. Rachel sat, feeling like she might throw up. "I want to be clear about why you're here," Patricia began. "We've been conducting an investigation into some concerns raised about favoritism and inappropriate conduct within the company. Your name came up during this investigation." Rachel's vision started to blur at the edges. "Specifically," Patricia continued, "we received an anonymous complaint suggesting that you've been receiving preferential treatment from Mr. Hart due to a personal relationship." The room was silent. Rachel could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. "Before we go any further," Daniel said, his voice calm and professional, "I need to disclose something. Rachel and I did meet before I started working here. We met at a hotel bar during a corporate event. We spent time together that evening. Neither of us knew that we would end up working together. It was purely coincidental." Patricia made a note on her paper. "When did this encounter occur?" "The Friday before I started. 3 days before my first day as CEO." "And have you maintained a personal relationship since then?" "No," Daniel said firmly. "When we realized the situation, we both agreed to keep things strictly professional. We've had minimal contact outside of necessary work communications." Patricia looked at Rachel. "Is this accurate?" Rachel's throat was dry. "Yes, everything he said is true. We met before he worked here. We had no idea we'd end up at the same company, and we haven't had a personal relationship since." The other HR representative spoke up. "We've reviewed all email communications between you and Mr. Hart. We've also interviewed several employees. What we've found is that Mr. Hart has actually been quite careful to maintain professional boundaries. If anything, he's been more distant with you than with other employees at your level. Rachel blinked. So I'm not in trouble? No, Patricia said. In fact, we've found that the complaint itself appears to have been made in bad faith. We believe Victoria Chen filed it as retaliation after Mr. Hart corrected her during the presentation. We've also discovered that Ms. Chen had been systematically taking credit for your work and the work of others for quite some time. Relief flooded through Rachel so intensely she thought she might cry. However, Patricia continued, we do need to address the situation going forward. While nothing inappropriate has occurred, the appearance of impropriety can be just as damaging as actual misconduct. We need to discuss how to handle this moving forward. Daniel leaned forward. I have a suggestion, if I may. Rachel's work on the marketing campaign has been exceptional. The launch is next week, and frankly, she's the only person who should be presenting it. But I think it would be beneficial for her career development if she had the opportunity to work with other departments, gain broader experience within the company. What are you suggesting? Patricia asked. A lateral move to the strategy department. Same level, same pay, but it would put her in a different reporting structure. She'd be working on company-wide initiatives rather than just marketing. It would also eliminate any concerns about direct oversight. Rachel stared at Daniel. He'd thought this through. He'd found a way to protect her reputation while actually giving her a better opportunity. I'd also like to recommend, Daniel continued, that Rachel lead the campaign presentation to the board next week. She earned it, and she deserves the recognition. Patricia nodded slowly. Rachel, how do you feel about this proposal? Rachel looked at Daniel, then back at Patricia. I think it sounds like a good opportunity. But I have one condition. Everyone looked surprised. I don't want people to think I got this because of any special treatment. I want it to be clear that this move is based on my work performance, nothing else. Absolutely, Patricia said. We'll make that very clear in the announcement. The meeting wrapped up, and Rachel walked out feeling like she was in a daze. Daniel caught up with her by the elevators. Can we talk? He asked quietly. Just for a minute? They rode the elevator down to the parking garage level, where it was quiet and empty. When the doors opened, they both stood there for a moment, not getting out. You didn't have to do all that, Rachel said. Yes, I did. Victoria was hurting people, and you deserved better than what was happening to you. People are still going to talk. Let them talk. You're brilliant at what you do, Rachel. Anyone who actually looks at your work can see that. The elevator doors started to close, and Daniel hit the button to hold them open. I've been thinking about something, he said. About what you said in my office. About how you wished we'd met somewhere else. Daniel, don't. Just hear me out. This situation with us working together, it's complicated. And you're right, that it's not fair. But in 6 months, maybe a year, you'll be established in the strategy department. You'll have proven yourself completely on your own merit. And at that point, there won't be any conflict of interest. Rachel's heart was racing. What are you saying? I'm saying that I haven't stopped thinking about you since that night at the hotel. I'm saying that my daughter asks about you every single day. I'm saying that if you're willing to wait, if you're willing to let us both do this the right way, then maybe we could try again, as equals, with no complications. That's a long time to wait for something that might not work out, Rachel said softly. I know. And I'm not asking you to put your life on hold or anything like that. I'm just asking if you'd be open to the possibility. No pressure, no expectations. Just the possibility that when the time is right, we could see if that connection we felt was real. Rachel thought about it. She thought about the night at the hotel bar, about how easy it had been to talk to him. She thought about the way he'd stood up for her work, about how he'd protected her even when it would have been easier not to. She thought about Sophie and her crayon drawings and her questions about the nice lady her dad had met. I can't promise anything, Rachel said finally. A lot can change in 6 months. I know, but I'm not seeing anyone else right now. And I'm not really interested in dating while I'm trying to prove myself in a new position anyway. A small smile appeared on Daniel's face. So that's a maybe? That's a maybe, Rachel agreed. The elevator dinged, indicating someone had called it from another floor. They both stepped out into the parking garage. I should get back to work, Rachel said. I have a presentation to prepare. You're going to do great. You always do. Rachel walked toward her car, then turned back. Hey, Daniel. Yeah, tell Sophie I said hi, and that I hope she's feeling better. I will. She'll like that. 6 months later, Rachel was sitting in a coffee shop on a Saturday morning when her phone buzzed. She'd just finished leading a successful company-wide strategy initiative that had impressed everyone, including the board. She'd made friends in her new department. She'd proven beyond any doubt that she'd earned her position through talent and hard work. The text was from Daniel. "Remember when you said you wished we'd met at a coffee shop? There's one on 5th Street. I'll be there at 2 o'clock today. No pressure. But I'll be the guy at the corner table with the cappuccino and the hopeful expression. Sophie will be with her grandmother. Just in case." Rachel read the message 3 times. She thought about everything that had happened, about all the complications and difficulties and awkward moments. She thought about how hard they'd both worked to do things the right way. Then she typed back a simple response. "See you at 2. She arrived at the coffee shop 10 minutes early, but Daniel was already there. When he saw her walk in, his whole face lit up in a way that was completely unprofessional and absolutely perfect. "Hi," he said as she sat down across from him. "I'm Daniel. I'm a single dad with terrible work-life balance and a daughter who talks too much about science experiments." Rachel smiled. "I'm Rachel. I'm probably too ambitious for my own good and I work way too many late nights. Want to get coffee and see if this goes anywhere? I thought you'd never ask." And this time, when they talked for hours and laughed at each other's stories and felt that same easy connection, there were no complications waiting around the corner. Just 2 people finally getting the fresh start they deserved. 3 years later, Sophie was the flower girl at their wedding. And in her speech at the reception, she told everyone about how her dad had met someone special at a hotel and then had to wait forever to take her on a real date. "But good things are worth waiting for," Sophie said, wise beyond her years. "That's what my dad always tells me." Rachel caught Daniel's eye across the reception hall. He smiled at her, that same warm smile from the hotel bar all those years ago. Yeah, she thought. Good things really are worth waiting for.